You scroll through your phone late at night, the usual distractions and notifications, until one message makes you freeze. A stranger knows your name, your routines, even your thoughts. What starts as an unsettling coincidence soon becomes something darker. They watch you, track you, and know things about your life that no one else should. No matter what you do, they're always one step ahead, always present. The digital world, once a refuge, becomes a trap, and escape feels impossible. They are watching, and you don't know how long you can hide from someone who knows everything about you. It was almost midnight. The only sound that filled the silence of the room was the rhythmic tapping of Sarah's fingers on her phone screen. Her bed was a mess, a few stray blankets draped over the floor, her laptop still open on the desk, half-finished coursework sprawled across the desk as she had left it in a rush earlier. The dim glow of her phone screen cast a faint light across her face. Her eyes darted quickly between her messages and social media notifications, the usual late-night scroll that had become a habit. But tonight felt different. The silence was heavier than usual, and as Sarah scrolled through her Instagram feed, she noticed something that made her heart skip a beat. A new message from an unknown account. She clicked on it, expecting the usual spam or maybe some random friend request. But when she opened the message, a chill ran down her spine. The message read, "I know you're awake, Sarah." Her breath caught in her throat. Her heart pounded louder now, louder than the tapping of her fingers on the phone. How could they know? She checked the username. It was an account with no posts, no followers, no bio. A ghost profile. She stared at the message for what felt like an eternity, her mind racing. Who would send such a message? And how did they know her name? She had only just gotten into bed and hadn't mentioned anything to anyone. She closed the app and opened it again, hoping it would disappear, hoping it was some sort of glitch. But no, the message was still there, sitting in her inbox. A knot twisted in her stomach. She locked her phone, but the sense of unease wouldn't go away. She tried to tell herself it was nothing, a prank, maybe. But it didn't feel like a prank. It felt too personal, too specific. Just as she lay back on her pillow, trying to shake off the creeping feeling, her phone buzzed again. This time, the screen lit up with a different notification. An Instagram story update from her best friend, Zoe. Sarah opened it, her heart still racing. But it wasn't Zoe's typical post. There, in the background of the story, just visible in the corner of the frame, was a shadow, a dark, unrecognizable figure standing by the window. Sarah felt a cold sweat form on her forehead as she froze, her thumb hovering over the screen. It was her room. The same room she had just moved into a few months ago. The same window. The same view outside. She stared at the image, her blood turning cold. Was this a joke? A trick? She didn't know anymore. She had only just gotten to know Zoe, and they'd never discussed anything about her room. This wasn't some inside joke between them. The shadow didn't belong to her or anyone she knew. It was too far away to make out any distinct features, but there was something undeniably wrong about it. A gut feeling that told her she wasn't just seeing things. She texted Zoe immediately. "What is this? Why is there someone in my room?" Her fingers trembled as she typed. But within seconds, the response came back. "Sarah, what are you talking about? I'm in the library. I just posted that story from a week ago." Sarah's stomach dropped. She scrolled back through the story to check the date. Zoe was right. It was an old post, from a week ago. But how could that be? How could someone have been in her room a week ago without her noticing? Was she just imagining things? She had to be. The fear crept up again, settling in her chest. She tried to dismiss it, but the feeling didn't go away. She sat up, swinging her legs off the bed, and looked around the room. The walls felt like they were closing in on her. The once cozy space now seemed foreign, threatening. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed darker, deeper. She couldn't shake the sensation that someone was watching her. Not just the feeling of being watched, but the certainty that someone was watching her. She walked to the window and peered outside, half expecting to see someone standing in the dark. The street outside her apartment was empty. The only movement was the occasional car passing by, its headlights briefly lighting up the street before fading into the night. She breathed out in relief. There was nothing there. But as she turned to go back to her bed, something caught her eye in the reflection of the window. For a split second, she saw a figure, just a shadow, like the one in Zoe's story, standing behind her, directly in her line of sight. Her breath hitched, her body frozen. She turned quickly, but no one was there. The room was empty. The door was locked. The windows were shut tight. She was alone. Her phone buzzed again, breaking the silence, and she jumped. She hesitated, almost afraid to check it. She picked it up and saw a new message from the same anonymous account. "Why don't you look under your bed, Sarah?" Her stomach churned. She almost dropped the phone. She stared at the screen, her fingers shaking uncontrollably. How could they know what she was doing? How could they know the smallest details about her life? She wasn't crazy. She had to be careful. She had to be smart. With her heart pounding in her chest, Sarah grabbed the nearest object, her phone charger, before slowly inching her way toward the side of the bed. She crouched down, staring at the dark space beneath it, her breathing shallow. She knew this was stupid. She had to be imagining things. But something deep inside told her this wasn't a trick. It wasn't a joke. Someone was in her apartment. She took a deep breath and, with trembling hands, pulled back the blanket that hung over the edge of the bed. The shadows underneath seemed to swallow the light. She peered into the dark space, straining her eyes to see, her heart pounding so loudly it drowned out every other sound. For a moment, there was nothing. Just the usual dust and forgotten items from when she moved in. But then, something caught her eye. A small, crumpled piece of paper. She pulled it out from under the bed, and as she unfolded it, her hands went cold. There, written in neat, almost obsessive handwriting, were the words, "I'm closer than you think." Her blood ran cold. She froze, unable to move. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Everything felt wrong. The shadows in the room grew longer, darker. She couldn't breathe. It wasn't a prank. It wasn't her imagination. Someone had been in her room. And they were still watching her. Jake's fingers hovered above the keyboard, the soft glow from his computer screen reflecting off his glasses. It was late, the kind of late where the world outside felt like it was slipping into oblivion, leaving him in his small apartment with only the hum of his PC for company. He leaned back in his chair, stretching his stiff neck, and glanced at the clock on his phone, 2:15 a.m. Another late-night coding session. Another project deadline looming. But this one was different. As he took a deep breath and refocused on the task in front of him, a notification popped up on his screen. It was from a user he didn't recognize. Follow request from @creepypastas_09. Jake frowned, intrigued but not exactly alarmed. It was common for people in his field to connect with each other, especially when working on similar projects or platforms. But the name was strange, unnerving even. He clicked on the profile to check it out. There was no profile picture, just the default icon. The bio was blank. The account had 0 followers and 0 posts, a completely empty account. It was eerie. Most accounts like this were either bots or spam, nothing worth spending time on. Jake shook his head and thought nothing more of it, brushing it off as an automated follow. But the next day, things took a turn. As Jake sat at his desk, sipping his third coffee of the day, he opened his social media accounts while waiting for a software update to finish. The same account, @creepypastas_09, had followed him across multiple platforms. Instagram, LinkedIn, even Twitter. It wasn't just one site anymore. It was everywhere. The stranger had gone out of their way to follow him on every social media profile he had, despite there being no trace of any connection between them. Jake tried to ignore the unsettling feeling gnawing at him. After all, what was the harm in a random follow? He would just block the account and move on. That's what he told himself. But as he sat there scrolling through his Twitter feed, he noticed something that sent a ripple of discomfort through him. A notification popped up on the screen. A direct message from the same account, @creepypastas_09. He opened it. The message was brief but chilling. "Nice project you're working on. I've seen your code before, Jake. Keep up the good work." His blood ran cold. He hadn't posted anything about his project online. The only people who knew about it were a few coworkers, And even they hadn't been briefed on all the details. How could this person know about it? His mind raced as he tried to come up with an explanation. Maybe it was just a coincidence. But the more he thought about it, the more the thought made his skin crawl. No one could know about that specific project unless they were looking at his personal files. He stared at the message, his mind grinding through possible explanations. Had he been hacked? Could someone have gained access to his files? He felt a wave of anxiety rising in his chest as he stared at the screen. He quickly dismissed it, telling himself he was just being paranoid. But the seed of unease had been planted. For the next few days, Jake's life started to feel like it was spiraling. It wasn't just the messages. It was the little things that started to feel off. His personal devices began acting strangely. His phone would randomly freeze or restart. His computer, usually reliable, started running slow, freezing at the most inopportune times. The feeling of being watched started creeping in whenever he was alone, especially at night. It was hard to shake the feeling that someone was always observing him, from a distance, waiting for him to slip up. One evening, as he was working late into the night again, another message from @creepypastas_09 arrived. This one was even more unsettling. Did you know your favorite coffee shop just put up new security cameras? Funny how they positioned one right by your usual table. You always sit in the corner, don't you? Jake's hand froze over the keyboard. His heart thudded in his chest. He wasn't paranoid. This was real. Someone was watching him, stalking his every move. The sense of dread that had been slowly building for days now hit him with full force. This wasn't just some bored internet user looking for attention. This person knew where he went, what he did, and even the smallest details of his routine. The coffee shop. How did they know that? He never mentioned it online. He'd never posted about it. The only way they could know was if they'd been following him. Jake closed his laptop, the heavy weight of fear settling in his stomach. His mind raced. Who could it be? A disgruntled colleague? A random stranger? Was it someone he'd known in his past, someone who held a grudge? The more he thought about it, the more his mind spiraled into an abyss of possibilities. He couldn't let this go on. He needed to do something about it, but what? He tried to block the account on every platform, but it didn't help. Every time he blocked one profile, another one would pop up. Different name, same eerie message, same unsettling knowledge of his life. It was like the stalker was always one step ahead of him. Days turned into weeks, and the stalking grew more intense. The messages became more frequent, more personal, and more disturbing. The stalker started mentioning other places Jake frequented, things he'd never posted online, like his gym and the bar he went to after work. One evening, after an exhausting workday, Jake opened his front door to find a small package sitting on the doorstep. It was neatly wrapped in plain brown paper with a simple note attached. "Nice to see you at the gym today, Jake. You looked like you were really pushing yourself." Jake's hands shook as he picked up the package. He stared at it, the blood draining from his face. Whoever this was, they were watching him everywhere he went. There was no escape. He turned the package over, his hands trembling, and ripped it open. Inside was a single object, a small keychain shaped like a coffee cup. It wasn't just a random item, it was a replica of the exact coffee cup he'd used earlier that week at his usual spot. His heart raced as he glanced nervously around the hallway, his mind reeling with fear. Was someone in his building? Was someone watching him right now? He quickly bolted the door and locked all the windows, retreating to his living room in a panic. He didn't know who this person was, but it was clear they were capable of anything. But the worst part came later that night. As he sat on his couch, trying to calm himself, his phone buzzed. Another message. From @creepypastas_09. "Are you scared yet, Jake? You should be. I'm closer than you think." Jake's entire body went cold. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. He looked around, feeling as if the walls were closing in on him. He was no longer just afraid. He was terrified. This person wasn't just stalking him online. They were watching him in real life. They were closer than he could ever have imagined. His world had become a nightmare where he was no longer in control. And the worst part? He had no idea when it would end, or if it ever would. Megan's heart raced as she sat down in front of her laptop. The soft hum of her fan was the only sound in the room, but it felt like the walls were closing in on her. She opened her inbox, scanning through her emails and messages. As a social media influencer, she was used to receiving messages from fans, businesses, and sometimes even strangers with odd requests. But this one felt different. The subject line was simple, "For you, Megan." She felt an uneasy shiver run down her spine as she clicked on the message. It was from an anonymous email address with a long string of characters. At first glance, the message seemed harmless. It was a compliment about her recent video, praising her beauty and creativity. But something about the wording made her pause. The message seemed too personal, as if the sender knew more about her than just what she had shared publicly. She shrugged it off. After all, people were always saying weird things online. Megan had learned to filter out the odd comments and focus on the supportive ones. But the email stuck with her. Over the next few days, more emails came in. They weren't threatening or malicious. They were just too specific, describing her outfits in detail, mentioning her favorite places to eat, even referencing her childhood memories, the little moments she had shared casually on her social media accounts, but never in detail. It was unsettling. The stranger never revealed their identity. There was no name, no face, just a constant stream of messages that felt more like an invasion than a compliment. The sender didn't just know what she wore or where she ate, they knew her emotions. They knew the moments when she'd felt vulnerable, the days when she'd struggled with self-doubt, and the exact times when she'd posted her most personal photos. The fact that they could tap into her private world so seamlessly made Megan's skin crawl. One night, she decided to do something about it. She couldn't ignore the unease any longer. Megan opened her email account and wrote a simple reply. "Who are you? Stop messaging me." The words seemed to hang in the air, as if they were heavier than they looked. She hit send and waited for a response, her fingers trembling as she closed her laptop. The reply came almost immediately. "You should know better than to hide, Megan. I've been following you for a long time." Her blood ran cold. The immediate response was what unsettled her the most. It was like they were waiting for her to react. She froze for a moment, staring at the screen. How did they know her full name? How did they know she had been hiding? The email didn't answer any of those questions, but it only raised more. Megan sat there in stunned silence, her mind racing. She'd had stalkers before, annoying ones who sent her creepy comments, even people who had shown up outside her house a few times. But this felt different. This wasn't just someone trying to get her attention. This was someone who had been in her life for a long time. Someone who was studying her, learning her routines, and slowly becoming a part of her world without her realizing it. Days passed, but the messages kept coming. Some were short and innocent, filled with compliments, but others were more sinister. They spoke of intimate details, moments Megan had shared with her friends, things that only the people close to her would know. One message, sent late one evening, caught her attention. It read, "I saw you at the coffee shop today. You were sitting alone by the window. You always order the same drink. I'll be there tomorrow too. We can share a cup." Megan's heart stopped. She hadn't posted about going to the coffee shop. She hadn't shared anything about her location. No one knew she went there every morning to clear her head, to escape the pressures of being constantly online. She didn't even mention it to her closest friends. So how could this person know? She scrambled to lock all her social media accounts, setting her profiles to private, but the feeling of being watched never went away. It wasn't just online anymore. It was real. The stalker wasn't confined to her inbox. They were part of her daily life now. The next day, Megan found herself at the coffee shop again, just like she always did. The routine was comforting, a small piece of normalcy in the chaotic world of being an influencer. She sat by the same window, her drink in hand, trying to ignore the nagging feeling in her gut. She had hoped, even though she knew deep down that it was foolish, that maybe it had all been a misunderstanding. Maybe someone was just using her name to get her attention. But as she sipped her coffee, she felt it, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. The hair on the back of her neck prickled, and she glanced around the room. The cafe was bustling, but no one stood out. Just the usual morning crowd. Still, Megan couldn't shake the feeling that someone was paying more attention to her than anyone else. She quickly left, barely finishing her coffee. The world outside the cafe seemed different somehow, darker, more oppressive. She tried to convince herself she was just being paranoid, that it was all in her head. But as she stepped outside, her phone buzzed. Another message. "You looked beautiful this morning, Megan. The coffee shop was the same as always, but I think you've changed. You're more beautiful than you've ever been." The hair on the back of her neck stood on end as she read those words. This person knew exactly where she was, and they were tracking her every move. She could no longer pretend it was a coincidence. She decided to take action. Megan went to the police, hoping they could help. But when she explained everything, the emails, the messages, the details about her life that the stalker had somehow discovered, the officers didn't seem as concerned as she had hoped. "Look, Megan, we get cases like this all the time. People get obsessed, especially when they have a platform like yours. They think they know you, and they start to cross boundaries. But unless there's direct harm or a threat to your safety, there's not much we can do." Megan left the station feeling deflated, more afraid than she had been before. It was as if the system wasn't equipped to handle her kind of problem, an invisible stalker who could manipulate the digital space to invade her reality. The law couldn't protect her from this kind of harassment. That night, as she sat in her bedroom, her phone buzzed again. Another email from the same anonymous sender. She opened it, but this time, there was something new. Attached to the message was a photograph, a photo of Megan, taken from outside her apartment. It wasn't blurry. It was clear. It was taken in the middle of the night, when she had just closed her blinds. The image was so intimate, so precise, that Megan felt her stomach turn. "I'm always close by, Megan. You'll get used to it. We'll be friends soon enough." Megan felt the walls close in on her. She couldn't escape. This person had woven themselves into every corner of her life. They knew where she went, when she went there, and everything about her. They weren't just stalking her, they were living in her life. Every detail was a part of their plan. Every action she took only brought her closer to their twisted version of reality. The fear was suffocating now. She didn't feel safe in her own home. She couldn't escape the constant feeling that someone, somewhere, was always watching her. She turned off her phone, but it didn't matter. The messages would always find a way to reach her. The stalker had become an indelible part of her existence, a shadow lurking just out of sight, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And Megan knew, deep down, that there would be no way out. No escape. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It wasn't just the long hours he'd been putting into his game development projects, it was something else entirely. He'd been a passionate gamer for years, but recently, there was a new presence that had begun to seep into his gaming experience, something that didn't belong. It started innocuously enough, with the occasional anonymous player joining his online games. It was normal in the competitive world of multiplayer games, but there was one player who stood out, Night Hunter 23. At first, Marcus thought little of it. There were always new players, after all, especially on the more intense servers. But Night Hunter 23 was different. The player was always in his games, no matter the time, no matter the day. At first, it didn't seem that strange, maybe just a dedicated player like him, but soon Marcus began to notice something odd. The way Night Hunter 23 played wasn't normal. They knew exactly where Marcus was at all times. No matter how fast he moved, no matter how many times he tried to hide, Night Hunter 23 would always find him. And it wasn't just in-game. After every match, the messages would come. "Nice hiding spot, Marcus. Better luck next time. See you at the same spot tomorrow. I'll be waiting." It wasn't just a coincidence anymore. It couldn't be. Marcus knew the game inside and out, and he could tell when something was wrong. How could Night Hunter 23 know where he was hiding unless they had been watching him? It started as a strange feeling in his gut, the kind you get when you think someone is looking over your shoulder. But it quickly escalated into something darker. The messages weren't just about his gameplay anymore. They were personal. One evening, after an intense gaming session, Marcus received a new message, but this one wasn't on his usual gaming platform. This time, it came through his email. He opened it cautiously, already bracing himself for something uncomfortable. The subject line was simple, "I know you're watching that show again." It made his blood run cold. How did Night Hunter 23 know he had been binge-watching a random series on his own time? He hadn't posted about it. It wasn't on his social media accounts. His email account didn't even have any references to it. His gut clenched with fear. He stared at the screen for a moment before opening the message, his heart thudding loudly in his chest. The body of the message was short, but its implications were chilling. "I see you when you're alone, Marcus. Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere." He tried to brush it off, thinking it was just some sick joke. A prank, maybe, from a fellow gamer who had figured out his streaming habits or seen him online in a forum. But the longer the messages continued, the more it seemed like this person had access to more than just his gaming life. They knew where he lived. They knew what time he went to bed. They knew the shows he liked to watch late at night, the obscure hobbies he kept to himself. It was like his life had become an open book to someone who knew exactly how to read it. The next few days were filled with a constant sense of dread. The messages from Night Hunter 23 came faster now, each one more personal, each one more invasive. "You really do need to get some sleep, Marcus. Your eyes look tired in your last stream. Maybe I can keep you company." He changed his passwords, locked down every account, and even called his internet provider to make sure his IP address wasn't compromised. But no matter what he did, the messages kept coming. His every move, his every action, online or offline, seemed to be followed by this mysterious figure. He started to see signs that the stalker was infiltrating his life beyond just the game. In one of the messages, Night Hunter 23 had mentioned the exact time Marcus left his apartment one day. The next message referenced the bus he took to work. "Did you enjoy the ride home? I saw you reading on the bus. You seemed distracted, just like always." It was becoming impossible to ignore. This person was clearly tracking his every step. They were following his physical movements, not just his online activity. There was no hiding anymore. It wasn't just a game anymore. It wasn't just a creepy player who liked to mess with him, it was something far worse. This was someone who was infiltrating his personal life in ways he didn't understand, someone who was taking the game off-screen and into reality. Things only escalated from there. One day, while Marcus was sitting at his computer, he received a notification on his phone. It was from a social media account he didn't recognize. He opened the message and froze. "I know you're thinking about blocking me, Marcus. Don't even try. I'll find another way to get through." The words hit him like a punch to the stomach. This wasn't just about playing the game anymore. This person wasn't trying to beat him in a virtual world. They were trying to control his real life. The thought terrified him more than anything. He had heard stories of stalkers before, people who become obsessed with their victims, slowly crossing boundaries that shouldn't be crossed. But this was something else. This was someone who had learned his habits, who knew his routines, and who was manipulating the situation, moving him like a puppet. He had to do something. But what could he do? His fear turned into anger as he sat there, helpless, unsure of how to fight back against an enemy who could hide behind a screen and slip into every corner of his life. Marcus began to feel trapped, like a character in a game with no exit, no escape. The idea of blocking Night Hunter 23 had crossed his mind, but it was clear that wouldn't solve anything. This stalker wasn't just in his game, they were in his life. They had been for a while, and now they were manipulating him in ways he didn't fully understand. Marcus spent the next few hours scouring online forums and doing everything he could to track down the source of the messages. He used every piece of tech knowledge he had gained over the years to try and trace the IP address of the email. But it was useless. The email kept coming from new, anonymous accounts, bouncing between various proxy servers. It was like trying to catch smoke with his bare hands. By the time evening came, Marcus was exhausted. He hadn't eaten, barely slept, and had lost all sense of time. His thoughts were consumed by the messages, by the constant intrusion into his life. His phone buzzed again. Another message from Night Hunter 23. This one, however, was different. It wasn't just an email or a social media message. It was a screenshot of his apartment. The picture was taken from the street below. He could see the faint glow of his computer screen in the window, his silhouette visible through the blinds. There was no mistaking it. This person wasn't just following his online activity, they were right outside his door. "Nice apartment you have, Marcus. Looks like you're not as alone as you think. I'm closer than you know." Marcus felt his stomach drop. It was one thing for the stalker to mess with him online, to invade his privacy through games and messages. But this was real. This person was physically outside his apartment, watching him. His mind raced, the room spinning as he realized the full extent of the situation. The powerlessness, the overwhelming fear, it all hit him at once. He had no idea who Night Hunter 23 was, or what they wanted, but he knew one thing: they weren't going to stop. And the worst part? He didn't know how to make them go away. Allison couldn't escape the gnawing feeling in the pit of her stomach, no matter how many times she tried to distract herself. She had been getting these strange messages for weeks now, cryptic, unsettling, and always just a little too accurate. At first, she thought it was just another form of online harassment, someone trolling, trying to get attention. But as the messages became more frequent, more personalized, she began to realize this was something different. This was far from a random internet user trying to get a rise out of her. It started innocently enough. She would get a message here and there, from an anonymous account on Twitter or Instagram, just saying things like, "I like the way you smile," or, "That picture of you at the beach was stunning." Compliments that seemed harmless at first, and she didn't give them much thought. But then came the odd ones. "I saw you yesterday at the coffee shop. You looked a little lost in thought," read one. Allison hadn't posted any photos of her coffee shop visits, let alone the one from that particular day. It was strange, but she convinced herself it was just coincidence. Maybe someone had spotted her there and remembered her face. But as the messages kept coming, they became more specific, more unsettling. One evening, after a long day at work, she got a message that stopped her cold. It was a simple text, no more than a few words, but the implications were terrifying. "You're wearing the same blue dress tonight as you were when you had dinner with your sister last week." Allison's mind raced. She hadn't posted anything about having dinner with her sister. She hadn't mentioned what she wore. How did this person know? Was she being followed? Could someone have been watching her from afar without her realizing it? Her heart began to pound in her chest as she reread the message several times, trying to make sense of it. But no explanation came to her. It was as if this stranger knew every detail of her life, the private moments she thought were hidden from the world. The next day, Allison noticed something even more disturbing. She had been walking home from work, the familiar route she'd taken for years now, when she felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. She looked over her shoulder but saw nothing unusual. The street was quiet, just the usual passers-by. Yet the feeling of being watched, of someone lurking just out of sight, was overwhelming. It followed her all the way home. As she unlocked her apartment door, her phone buzzed. She opened it without thinking, only to see a new message pop up. That was quite the walk home, wasn't it? The street was a little busier than usual today, but you seemed lost in your thoughts. Allison's blood ran cold. She had felt someone's presence, a strange intuition telling her she wasn't alone, and now this message confirmed it. She had been watched. She had no idea how or when, but someone had been following her, seeing her every move. A sense of dread washed over her, and for the first time, she wondered if the stalker had been closer than she realized. As the days passed, the messages became more insistent. They weren't just talking about her appearance or her daily habits anymore. They were delving deeper into more private, personal aspects of her life. Her childhood memories. Her favorite childhood pet. Even the name of her first crush. How could they know these things? Allison couldn't figure it out. She had never shared them online, never told anyone. The only way this person could know these things was if they had been following her for a long time, quietly slipping into her life like a shadow she hadn't noticed. One afternoon, while scrolling through her Instagram, Allison stumbled upon something she had not expected, a post from her best friend, Emma. It was a selfie of the two of them from a coffee shop they'd gone to just the previous week. The caption read, "Catching up with my favorite girl. We talked about everything as always." Allison's stomach dropped. She clicked on the post to read the comments, and that's when she saw it. A comment from the anonymous account, the one that had been sending her the creepy messages. "Great to see you two hanging out. By the way, Emma's wearing that red sweater she loves so much." Allison's hands trembled as she read those words. The comment was harmless on the surface, but it struck her in a way she couldn't explain. How could this person know about Emma's favorite sweater? They weren't supposed to know that. She hadn't mentioned it anywhere, not even to Emma. She looked around the room, suddenly feeling claustrophobic. Had they been watching her and Emma the entire time? Was this person somehow lurking in the background, observing every moment, every interaction, every conversation? She called Emma immediately, her voice shaky. She explained everything. The messages, the unsettling details, the comments on the Instagram post. Emma listened, her voice calm but concerned. "Allison, maybe it's just a coincidence," Emma suggested, though her tone lacked conviction. "You're probably overthinking it. You know how social media is. Sometimes people just know things. Maybe someone has been paying more attention to you than you think." But Allison knew it wasn't just a coincidence. It couldn't be. She had been in control of her life, her privacy, her spaces, but now it felt like all of that was slipping through her fingers. She was losing control. The anonymity of the internet had given this stranger a power over her that felt terrifying. The next morning, Allison decided to take matters into her own hands. She scoured through every message from the stalker, every interaction she had online, trying to find a clue, something that could tell her who this person was. But everything was blank. No identifying information, no clear link to anyone she knew. The messages were always from anonymous accounts, different usernames, different platforms. It was impossible to trace, like trying to catch smoke with her bare hands. As she sat at her desk, trying to think, another message appeared on her phone. She opened it, feeling a deep, sinking feeling in her chest. "Allison, I know you're scared. But you don't have to be. I'm just trying to help you remember. I'm the one who's been with you all along." Allison's breath caught in her throat. "I'm the one who's been with you all along." The words echoed in her head, reverberating like a broken record. She read them over and over, the weight of the message sinking into her bones. She felt dizzy. Who was this person? How had they been with her all along? What did they mean? The phone buzzed again, pulling her out of her thoughts. Another message, this time with a picture attached. It was a photo of her walking home from work, just like the other day. But this time, she could see someone in the distance, standing in the shadows, barely visible in the corner of the frame. The photo was grainy, but there was no mistaking it. Someone had been following her, capturing every moment of her life. The terror that had been simmering inside her for weeks now bubbled to the surface. She felt trapped, isolated, suffocated by the invisible hand that seemed to be wrapped around her life. There was no escape. No place to hide. She was being stalked, but not just by a faceless stranger. She was being hunted by someone who knew her too well, someone who had been watching her, waiting for the right moment to make their presence known. The worst part? Allison realized with growing dread that she wasn't sure if she could stop them. She couldn't hide anymore, couldn't protect herself. The stalker wasn't just online, they were everywhere. They had already infiltrated her life, her home, her every thought. She was never truly alone anymore. The shadow had always been there, watching, waiting for its next move. And Allison? She was already trapped. Liam hadn't been able to sleep for days. The nightmares kept him up at night, waking him from restless dreams with his heart pounding. It was always the same, the figure in the shadows, the cold feeling that crept up his spine, the sense of someone, lurking just outside the realm of his vision. The more he tried to ignore it, the more it seemed to haunt him. The worst part? The nightmares weren't just dreams anymore. They were starting to bleed into his waking life. It all started 2 weeks ago, when he first noticed the strange messages. They weren't like the usual spam or random ads that flooded his inbox. No, these were different. The first one came late at night, just after he'd finished watching a movie in his apartment. The message was simple, direct, and unsettling. "I see you, Liam. I know what you're doing." He had dismissed it at first as a prank, maybe even a mistake. After all, who would send a message like that? But as the days went by, more messages came. Each one more specific, more detailed than the last. I saw you at the grocery store today. You looked like you were looking for something, one read. The hair on the back of his neck stood up as he read it, because just that morning he had spent 10 minutes wandering the aisles, unsure of what he actually needed. No one had been there. No one had seen him, but this person somehow knew, somehow saw through the walls of his apartment into his very life. At first, Liam tried to shake it off. He figured it was just a coincidence, or maybe even a social media stalker who had some odd obsession. But the messages didn't stop. In fact, they started coming more frequently. The messages started mentioning personal details about his day, details he hadn't shared with anyone. His choice of breakfast, the color of his shoes, the exact time he'd left the house in the morning. His every move was being watched, and it was starting to drive him mad. But it wasn't just the messages that troubled him. It was the other things, the little signs that something was wrong. His phone would buzz, but there wouldn't be any new messages or notifications. The streetlights outside his apartment seemed to flicker in strange patterns, like someone was watching him through the cracks in the darkness. And the shadows, they seemed to grow longer, more defined, no matter how much light he put on them. It was like something, or someone, was hiding in the corners of his vision, waiting for the right moment to strike. Liam had always been a skeptic. He didn't believe in paranormal activity, didn't buy into the idea of ghosts or shadow people. He prided himself on being logical, rational. But the longer this went on, the harder it was to dismiss. There was something tangible, something real about the presence that lingered in his apartment, something that was slowly sinking into his every thought. One night, after he had finished a long day of work, he sat down to check his email. The usual batch of promotions, bills, and spam littered his inbox. But then he saw it. Another message from the anonymous sender. This one was different, though. Instead of being written out in the usual cryptic, disjointed style, this one was neat, methodical, almost too precise. I'm in the building with you, Liam. I'm just down the hall, waiting for you. His stomach turned. He looked around his apartment, half expecting someone to be standing there in the doorway, watching him. The only sound was the soft hum of his refrigerator, the faint buzz of a distant streetlight filtering through the blinds. But the message had been so precise, so intimate, that it sent a wave of terror through him. How could they know? He hadn't told anyone where he lived. He hadn't posted anything about his apartment. The feeling of isolation was quickly replaced by one of entrapment. This person, this presence, was too close. They were in the very walls of his life. Liam's thoughts were running in circles. Should he call the police? Should he confront this person? But what if it was just a prank? He had to know for sure. He couldn't live in fear of someone who might just be a figment of his imagination. That night, after another sleepless hour spent scrolling through his messages, he decided to take action. He grabbed his phone and checked the security cameras outside his building, the ones he had installed when he moved in. His phone screen lit up, displaying the usual live feed from his front door. At first, there was nothing, just the quiet, empty hallway. But then, something shifted. He saw movement at the end of the corridor, a shadow passing by his door. His heart stopped. He froze, staring at the screen in disbelief. The figure was tall, clothed in dark, nondescript clothing. He couldn't make out any details, but the shape was unmistakable. The figure had been waiting, lurking, just outside his door. Liam's breath caught in his throat. The idea that someone had been stalking him for weeks now, watching him from the other side of his apartment door, made his skin crawl. He quickly tapped to rewind the footage, trying to catch a clearer glimpse of the person. But when he played it back, the figure was gone. The hallway was empty, silent. There was no sign of anyone. He checked the footage several more times, each time hoping for a clearer picture, but every time, the same result, nothing. It was as if the figure had evaporated into thin air. Liam couldn't shake the feeling that he was losing his grip on reality, that maybe he was seeing things that weren't there. But the sense of being watched, the looming presence just outside his door, was too real to ignore. As the days passed, Liam's paranoia grew. The messages kept coming, each one more invasive than the last. They knew things that no one could possibly know. His thoughts, his movements, his most intimate moments. And it wasn't just the messages. The physical signs of his stalker were becoming more apparent. His furniture had been moved slightly out of place, his bookshelves rearranged, his personal items, things he hadn't touched, moved from where he'd left them. It was subtle at first, just little changes that could easily be overlooked. But over time, they added up. Someone was inside his apartment, rifling through his belongings. He installed additional locks on his door, bolted the windows, and even considered moving to a new place entirely. But nothing seemed to help. The presence remained, a constant reminder that someone was watching, always just out of sight, always just one step behind him. The messages continued, their tone shifting from eerily polite to threatening. "You don't need to hide anymore, Liam. I know everything about you. I've always known." The words sent a jolt of terror through him. They weren't just stalking him anymore, they were in his life. They had become a part of it, weaving themselves into his every thought, his every moment. He couldn't escape. There was nowhere he could go where this person wouldn't find him. The walls of his apartment felt like they were closing in on him, suffocating him with their oppressive weight. And the worst part was that he didn't know who this person was, or why they were doing this to him. One night, after weeks of restless anxiety, Liam decided he had had enough. He was going to confront this person, face to face. He couldn't live in fear anymore. He couldn't keep running from something that might not even exist. He pulled on his jacket and left his apartment, determined to find out the truth. The hallway was quiet, the usual hum of the building's old heating system the only sound. He walked down the corridor, every step echoing in the silence. His heart was pounding, his palms sweating. As he approached the end of the hallway, he saw something that made his blood run cold. The door to his neighbor's apartment, just a few doors down, was slightly ajar. A shadow moved behind it. Liam's breath caught in his throat. He couldn't stop now. He had to find out who was behind all of this. He approached the door cautiously, his mind racing. What if it was the person who had been tormenting him? What if this was the moment everything came to light? Before he could make a move, the door creaked open, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. He stepped back, his heartbeat thunderous in his ears. And then, as he turned to leave, his phone buzzed again. The message was simple: "I'm right behind you, Liam." The world spun around him as he turned, the darkness swallowing him whole. There was nowhere to run. Samantha had always been cautious online. She knew the risks, the stories of people being followed, tracked, or harassed through their social media. But she had never thought it would happen to her. It started subtly, almost innocently, with messages from someone she didn't know, a username she didn't recognize, commenting on her latest photos. At first, she dismissed it. People often left comments without thinking, and she was used to seeing random users admire her posts. But this person was different. The messages were specific, uncanny in their detail, and they seemed to know things no one else could. The first unsettling message wasn't even threatening. It was simply a comment under a photo she had posted of her cat, Felix. "Felix looks tired today. Did he stay up all night again?" Samantha froze. She hadn't mentioned her cat staying up, and there was no way the commenter could have known that. She scrolled back, trying to find clues, maybe a reply she had sent, a caption she had forgotten, but there was nothing. The message hung in her mind like a weight, and she told herself not to overreact. After all, it could just be coincidence. But then the messages began to multiply, and coincidence became impossible to believe. Late at night, when the apartment was quiet and Samantha was trying to fall asleep, her phone would buzz with a new notification. A direct message on Instagram, another comment on Twitter, an anonymous email. Each one revealed details of her life she had never shared online. One read, "You stayed up late last night thinking about your ex. I can see it in your eyes." Samantha's hands shook as she read the words. She hadn't told anyone she was still thinking about her ex. She hadn't posted anything remotely personal. Yet here was a stranger, describing her thoughts like they had been watching her from the shadows. It was no longer just online. The fear crept into her daily life. Walking home from work, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was following her, their presence hidden just out of her peripheral vision. She would catch glimpses of a shadow, hear a footstep behind her that wasn't her own, but whenever she turned, there was nothing. The messages continued, always in perfect timing, always revealing that someone was aware of where she was, what she was doing, even what she was feeling. Nice walk home today. Did you enjoy thinking about last summer? One message stopped her cold. She had never told anyone that she thought about last summer specifically. Samantha tried to fight it. She changed passwords, deactivated accounts, even stopped posting online for a week, hoping that would break the connection. But it didn't help. The messages adapted, finding new ways to reach her. Anonymous numbers, new accounts, emails, even texts from unknown numbers. She began to dread her phone buzzing, each notification now a dagger of anxiety that made her heart pound. Sleep became a distant memory. Samantha's nights were filled with restless tossing and turning, listening for any noise outside her apartment. Every creak in the building, every distant car horn, felt like a sign that she wasn't alone. One night, she woke to find her bedroom window slightly open. She was sure she had locked it. Panic flooded her chest as she bolted upright in bed. Her heart raced, her breath came in short gasps, and she immediately grabbed her phone. A new message had arrived. I just wanted to let you know I was here. I watched the window carefully. I see everything. The horror of realizing someone had been inside her apartment, or at least close enough to observe her so intimately, made her stomach churn. She called the police, hoping for some reassurance, some protection, but there was little they could do. Anonymous accounts, digital traces that vanished as soon as they were discovered, and no direct threats that could be legally enforced. It was like she was fighting a ghost. Days blurred together as the stalker intensified their presence. Samantha couldn't go anywhere without fear. Even routine trips, like grocery shopping or walking her cat outside, were tainted by the knowledge that someone could be watching, recording her every move. She began noticing subtle signs. The way her mailbox had been slightly opened, her apartment door showing small scratches she hadn't made, the faint sound of movement in the hallways outside. Every ordinary event became a potential danger. Every person she passed on the street could be the stalker, observing silently. The messages became more invasive, almost taunting. I know you love the coffee at the corner cafe. I see you go every morning. You don't even notice me, do you? Samantha's eyes widened in terror. She had never posted about her morning routines. How could someone know this? How could they track her habits so carefully, so obsessively? It was no longer a question of curiosity, it was obsession. Her anxiety turned into paranoia, and paranoia into action. Samantha installed cameras in her apartment, locked every door and window, and began checking every noise, every shadow. Yet the messages still came, always just in time to remind her that she was being watched. The stalker was adapting, always staying one step ahead. They knew her routines, her friends, her habits, even the smallest personal quirks. One message read, I see you when you smile at your friend Sarah. You think she doesn't notice, but I do. Samantha could barely process it. How could this person know about private conversations she had thought were safe? Sleep-deprived and terrified, she began to retreat from the world. Friends stopped calling because she refused to answer, family worried because she wouldn't go out. She spent hours sitting by the cameras she had installed, watching the feeds, trying to anticipate the stalker's next move. Every shadow, every flicker of movement set her heart racing. The person wasn't just online. They were omnipresent, an invisible force that seeped into every part of her life. Then one evening, the messages changed tone. They became more direct, more personal, more threatening. You can't escape me, Samantha. I know when you leave, I know when you sleep. I'm always near. The weight of the words pressed down on her chest like a physical force. She had been trying to convince herself that maybe this person would tire, that maybe they would stop. But it was clear now, they were escalating. They wanted control, and Samantha had become the center of their obsession. Panic set in fully when she noticed a shadow lingering outside her apartment window one night. She was certain she had locked every access point, yet the feeling was unmistakable. Her hands shook as she grabbed her phone, the camera feed showing nothing, but her instincts screamed otherwise. It was no longer about safety, it was about survival. Every message, every shadow, every untraceable account told her the same thing. She was being watched, tracked, and hunted, and there was nowhere she could go where the stalker wouldn't find her. Samantha knew one terrifying truth: she couldn't live like this indefinitely. The stalker had embedded themselves in her life, leaving traces she couldn't erase, leaving fear she couldn't escape. And yet, each day, each message, each shadow outside her window reminded her of their power. The anonymous presence was always one step ahead, controlling the rhythm of her life, dictating her movements, invading her thoughts. She realized, with a cold clarity, that this was no longer a game of messages or comments. It was a relentless, consuming obsession, and she was trapped in its web. By the time the week ended, Samantha was a ghost of her former self. Her world had contracted into the small, locked perimeter of her apartment. She barely ate. She barely slept. She barely lived. And yet, through all of it, the messages continued. Always precise. Always personal. Always close enough to make her question whether she was being watched at that very moment, right behind the screen, or even in the shadows of her own home. The stalker was no longer a stranger online. They were a presence, a shadow, a constant, inescapable part of her life, and Samantha knew that her reality had forever changed. Eva had always felt like she had control over her life. She knew the importance of protecting her privacy, being cautious about what she shared online. But one night, while scrolling through her social media, she realized she had made one small but significant mistake. She had posted an innocuous picture of her new car. It wasn't much, just a snapshot from the dealership, showing off the shiny exterior with a caption that read, "New chapter, new car. Hashtag feeling blessed." A harmless post, or so she thought. At first, it seemed like nothing had changed. Her friends liked the photo, left a few supportive comments, and life went on. But then the messages started. They began subtly, small comments under her posts. "Nice car, Eva. It's beautiful in that parking spot." She didn't think much of it at first. After all, the car was parked outside her apartment, visible from the street. A person could easily guess where it was parked. But as the comments grew more frequent, they began to feel less like coincidence and more like something deliberate. "I see you parked there again. You always take your car out at 3 p.m., don't you?" Eva's heart began to race. She had never mentioned when she took her car out, never posted about her routine. There was no way this person could know unless they were watching her every move. She chalked it up to coincidence. Maybe it was a friend who had seen her drive out. But the messages kept coming. Every post she made was met with a comment about her day, about her movements. They knew when she left her apartment, when she went to work, when she stopped by the coffee shop. It was as though they were tracking her every step. At first, she tried to ignore it. She blocked a few accounts, deleted the comments, and made her profile private. But the messages didn't stop. They only became more invasive. "I watched you buy groceries this morning, Eva. You chose the apples in the third row. Why not the ones in the front?" That comment made her stomach churn. She hadn't shared that information with anyone. She hadn't told anyone what she bought or when she went shopping. She felt a cold rush of fear as she stared at the screen. Things only escalated from there. Every day, the messages became more detailed. "I saw you talking to a man at the cafe today. He's cute. Are you two dating?" Eva had gone to the cafe with a friend, but no one had posted anything about the encounter. The stalker knew more about her life than anyone had a right to. At one point, they even sent her a picture of herself walking down the street, taken from a distance. It was clear that they were following her. They were watching her every move, and Eva had no idea how they were doing it. Her anxiety grew with each passing day. She stopped going out, started taking alternate routes to work, and even changed her routine at home. But no matter what she did, the messages kept coming. They were getting closer. One afternoon, after a long day of avoiding any social media activity, she received a text from an unknown number. She opened it, already feeling a knot form in her stomach. The message read, "I see you're home alone tonight, Eva. It's quiet, isn't it?" A chill ran down her spine. How did they know that? How could they possibly know she was home, alone, at that exact moment? She looked around her apartment, suddenly feeling exposed. It was the middle of the day, but she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her through the window, lurking just out of sight. She called her best friend, Maria, in a panic. "Maria, something's wrong. Someone's watching me. I think they know everything about me. They know where I go when I leave, who I talk to." Her voice cracked as she spoke, the weight of the situation settling in. Maria tried to calm her down. "It's okay, Eva. You're probably just overthinking it. People leave weird comments on social media all the time. It doesn't mean they're stalking you." But deep down, Eva knew it wasn't that simple. She had tried everything to stop the messages, to block the accounts and shut out the noise. But the stalker had been relentless, and now, it wasn't just online. There was a presence in her life that she couldn't ignore. That night, after hours of being unable to sleep, Eva's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a voice message. She hesitated for a moment before pressing play. The voice on the other end was low and almost too familiar. "I see you're in bed now, Eva. I've been watching you for a while. You've been sleeping so soundly lately, haven't you? You've been so peaceful." Eva's blood ran cold. She could hear the sound of her own breathing in the background, steady and slow. It was as if the stalker had been sitting in the dark, listening to her breathe. She quickly hung up and stared at her phone, trying to process what had just happened. The voice was so calm, so familiar, like they had been with her every step of the way. They knew everything about her, everything she had done in the past few weeks, everything that had once been private. The next day, Eva took action. She contacted the police, but they were not able to do much. The stalker hadn't directly threatened her, at least not in a way that was actionable. There were no concrete laws against online harassment unless it became physical, and there was no evidence that anyone had broken into her apartment. The police told her to be careful and to document everything. But the worst part was that they couldn't promise anything. There was no guarantee they would catch the person behind the messages. Eva felt powerless, as if the stalker was slipping through the cracks, always one step ahead. She installed security cameras around her apartment, bought a home security system, and began to live her life with an overwhelming sense of fear. She would check the locks on her doors 3 or 4 times before going to bed, and she began avoiding the windows altogether, convinced that someone was always outside, watching. But even with all the precautions, she couldn't shake the feeling that the stalker was getting closer, inching their way into her life in ways that she couldn't predict. One evening, after returning from a work meeting, Eva found something that made her heart stop. Her apartment door was slightly ajar. She was sure she had locked it before she left. Fear gripped her chest as she slowly pushed the door open, but there was nothing. No one was inside. But a chill filled the room as she noticed something new. On her kitchen counter, there was a small, wrapped box. She hadn't left it there, and no one else had access to her apartment. It was as if the stalker had placed it there, just to let her know that they could enter her space whenever they wanted. Inside the box was a simple note. "I'm always here, Eva. Always watching. You'll never escape me." Her hands trembled as she read the words. The feeling of being completely trapped in her own life overwhelmed her. The stalker wasn't just an anonymous presence behind a screen anymore. They had found a way into her physical space, into her very home, and she had no idea how or why. The feeling of being watched, of being hunted, became unbearable. No matter how many locks she installed, no matter how many precautions she took, she could never be sure of her own safety. The stalker had made their presence known, and no matter where she went, no matter how far she tried to run, they would always be there, lurking in the background, waiting for the perfect moment to remind her that she was never alone. The messages kept coming, each one more intrusive than the last. They had become a constant in her life, something she could no longer escape. Eva realized, with a sinking feeling in her chest, that she was living in a nightmare. She couldn't stop it. There was no escape. She was caught in a web of someone else's creation, and she wasn't sure if she would ever find a way out. The worst part? The stalker wasn't just watching her anymore. They had become a part of her life, a presence that would follow her wherever she went. There was no safe place, no haven, no relief, just the constant fear that someone, somewhere, was always watching.